Hello there, welcome to Roots and Wings Iwachu, the platform where we explore the lives, initiatives, activities and contributions of Rwandans living abroad. In this particular episode, we have a special guest. She's called Linda Iriza. She initiated a Kinyarwanda teaching program in Australia, in Perth, to help preserve the Rwandan culture among younger generation. We learn about her journey, the structure of the classes, and the broader impact of her work within the diaspora community. Stay with us as we have this insightful conversation about the intersection of language, culture, and identity. Welcome, Linda, to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll start by, can you a little bit introduce yourself to us? Who is Linda? You're currently based in Australia, but we would like to know more about you before we proceed with the program that you started.
Yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Linda Iriza. I'm based in Perth, Western Australia. I've been there for about 15 years, and outside of the Rwandan community, I do a lot of work within the arts. So I work for different arts institutions, as a producer of a festival, from focusing on music shows to theatre shows, and also more broadly within the Rwandan community. There's a lot of initiatives that our community does in Perth that's also connected to other cities around Australia as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Linda. Going straight to today's program, what inspired you to start a program of teaching Kinyarwanda to younger generation, and how did the idea come to life?
Yeah, so in Perth, we've got a Rwandan community abroad, Perth, an RCA similar to many other cities. And when we had a proper structure going forward with a committee, we kind of saw that one of the main issues that we had as a community was that there was a lack of language. And there was a lot of young Rwandans who were born and raised in Australia who who can't speak to their parents in Kinyarwanda, and also more broadly who can't speak to anyone over the phone who's living in Rwanda, for example, whether it's their grandparents or their aunties. And there was just that really kind of quite a grief around the realization that language can be lost. And so once we started to see that there is a major issue, we decided as a committee that we need to make sure that we're doing all the work that's possible to ensure that this grief and reality doesn't happen and language doesn't get lost. Yeah.
So can you explain to us a little bit how the classes are structured and what is the age gap, the students who learn the Kinyarwanda, and if you could explain it a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we've been doing the classes for about 2 years. We started in 2023, and it's a beautiful group of about 25 students. We started a lot bigger, but of course people's commitments drop out. But there's been a consistent 25 students who have attended for the past 2 years. Their age range is quite wide. They're from the age of 4 years old all the way to 16. Some of them are 17. Just because they are both kind of on a similar language level. Like all of them are really at the beginning point of learning how to pronounce their last names properly. A lot of them started struggling to pronounce their last names properly, or their father's names or their mother's names. So that's been really beautiful. And the current structure is that we have classes every Saturday during the school term. So in the Australian curriculum, there's 4 terms. Starting in February all the way to December, and we meet from 1:30 p.m. to 4:30 and run classes every Saturday.
So that means that the Kinyarwanda teaching program is part of the Australian academic calendar?
It's, well, on a very casual way. We follow, as a community, we try to follow the Australian curriculum, like academic structure. So that way also children, they don't really want to, it's a bit difficult to put them into classes during the school holidays, for example. So we found it easier when they are in the process of also studying and going to normal school, they can come on Saturday and do the Kinyarwanda classes, and that they kind of receive it a little bit, they take it a little bit more seriously than doing it as a fun holiday session. So we found that that works better. Yeah.
So initially when the program started, how did the Rwandan community in Perth initially responded to the idea of learning Kinyarwanda, especially both to the side of the parents, but also to the kids?
Yeah, on the parents' side, it's been really beautiful. Like, for example, we've got a teacher, his name is Maurice Mudachumura, and he wanted to really volunteer himself as the teacher because he was also quite sad that his own children couldn't speak Kinyarwanda back to him. They were maybe, I would understand a few words, but even they would struggle with understanding what the Kinyarwanda word is for food or a fork or a cup or water, just really basic things. So he was getting really worried and he volunteered, and he now really takes a lot of pride in showing up on Saturdays and teaching and volunteering his time. And more broadly, parents were really excited and very receptive. We had a huge number of parents signing up their kids and saying that this is really necessary. They did see the gap that, there was also there's a big youth gap that's missing, people who are age 18 and above. So parents were really wanting for that to happen, but it was just a bit tricky because we've only got one teacher at the moment. And then in terms of the kids, it's really beautiful. At first it was difficult because they didn't understand the importance of it. They didn't really see the value in it, but they started to value it when they were building friendships with the other children because they were actually spending more time with them outside of the planned community events that we usually have. And once they started to form friendships, they started to actually enjoy learning. There's still some difficult, moments here and there when they're not interested in a certain topic, but for the most part, everybody's quite receptive.
Yeah. I would like to go more deeper into the lessons or the classes that you teach to these that these students attend. Of course, there are challenges. I would like to hear what are some of the challenges that you faced when you started the program, but also during the program. Isn't it a little hard to teach students who are 16 years old, not at a younger age, to get to know Kinyarwanda? How is that challenging, and also how do you overcome such challenges?
Yeah, there's been quite a few challenges, and starting from the one that you just mentioned. For example, when we started, we had a lot of other enrollments of children, of young people who were 18 and some 19, some who were 20. And they soon, after maybe a month of trying it out, they dropped out just because they felt a sense of maybe a slight shyness or a slight embarrassment that they're learning with a 4-year-old or 5-year-old. So it's really tricky to come to terms with that. But that's okay too, so that happens. And I guess the way we are answering that challenge is to really focus on younger children who hopefully their older siblings, once they see that the younger siblings are progressing, they will also be inspired and also not feel so shy or ashamed. So that's one of the ways that we're hopefully they will inspire them. And another challenge is a lack of resources like Rwandan books and language books or children's books that people can read stories. So we're struggling a little bit in finding those books and getting them across the ocean. And then another challenge was really around just the commitment. It's a big commitment. It's every Saturday. It's a commitment from the teacher Maurice and myself as well, showing up every Saturday to ensure that we're there and present for the children. But it's also a huge commitment for parents. A lot of the times everyone is weekends is when people can actually work. So a lot of people work on weekends and get paid extra when they work those shifts. The way we found parents have actually been able to solve that issue themselves, where they carpool their children. So one parent will make sure that they're taking 3 or 4 families to class, and then they swap for the following week. So that's been really beautiful and organic for the parents to find that solution within themselves. Yeah.
Well, what kind of support do you get from the Rwandan community there in Perth, but also broadly the Rwandan community in Australia? Does the Australian government also try to help you, or the embassy of Rwanda in Australia try to help you in that move?
Yeah, starting from the community, like it's really beautiful, like from the parents, like them showing up and signing up their children is a huge commitment. So that has been really incredible to receive. And also whenever we have community events, like children, they've now learned how to sing the national anthem. They've learned how to quiz and people, like other young people. So it's been really beautiful whenever the children are, or the students are presenting something at events. Everyone is quite surprised at how fast they're learning, but of course at their age they learn quite quickly. And then more broadly, in terms of the Rwandan community across Australia, they've been really supportive. Like whenever we post updates on social media, they're quite supportive, and they talk with the teacher, and as they want to also start their own versions of classes, and hopefully we are going to align them so then that way we're learning on the same level and we're progressing at the same rate, and that we're also able to support each other and give each other feedback as well when the lessons are kind of aligned. We do have a lot of support from the embassy, which is based in Singapore, that looks after Singapore, Indonesia, New Zealand, Australia. It's a big area. So they support us a lot in encouraging us, but also connecting us to different institutions in Rwanda that can ensure that we've got resources that we need. And they always extend their hand to us as well. And in terms of the Australian government, it's quite supportive. There's not just to the Rwandan community in terms of Kinyarwanda classes, but many other language groups that exist in the community in Perth. There's support through funding. For example, the Department of Home Affairs is currently supporting this 2024 and 2025 classes, and supporting through funding that helps pay for the venue, helps pay for excursions, and many other things. Yeah.
So still on on this program, I want to know how you collaborate with the teacher. I want to know like who does the administration work and who does the teaching work. Isn't it a little bit heavy to teach every Saturday? What if there are students who like miss one class? How do you manage to help them catch up so that you can also move along?
Yeah, it's a tricky dance to kind of figure out. But for example, our teacher Maurice Mudachumura, he's incredible. So he takes care of like the lessons, and he gets all the lesson plans from Ineko Yumucho released a book it's quite old, in 2016. I'm sure that there's more updated versions of it, but it's basically a teacher's handbook of teaching year 1 Kinyarwanda classes. So that's what he follows, and he creates the lesson plans, and then I do all the administration. So I answer emails, I print out all the paperwork that needs to get printed. I also drive some of the students who live near me. I pick them up and bring them to classes. And also I apply for the funding as well amongst some of the other RCA committee members. And in terms of other administration tasks that I do is that I propose different ideas to Maurice and the parents as well about excursions that we can go to, whether it's to go visit other art institutions, to learn about cultural heritage and language preservation, and go to museums, and really engage young Rwandan children to also see themselves in a bigger world, that they're not alone, and that it is important to learn about your language and speak it. So that's been really beautiful in how we share those tasks. And Maurice is quite older than me, so he's a parent, so he knows how to deal with children better than I do. And I actually go to those classes because I learn from him too. And in terms of students and how they struggle, there's a lot of struggle. Sometimes students have other commitments. Maybe they have a basketball game or a netball game, and it clashes. And of course, like, kids should be as involved in the community as possible. A basketball game is also as crucial as a language class. So what we usually do is we communicate with the parents and ensure that we are giving them, like, we ask them to tell us if kids can't make it to classes, and if there's any resources or homework that we need to give, we send it on a WhatsApp group for parents to follow. And we really encourage the parents to make sure that they're teaching the children and they're speaking to them in Kinyarwanda, even if it's a bit of a struggle at home. And if you've missed a few classes, it's okay for you to come back. and just kind of just catch up slowly. And sometimes I sit with whoever is struggling the most. Usually really young kids who are 4 and they're learning how to write, for example. So sometimes we have a little corner of the strugglers in the back of the room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Still on that, you mentioned one challenge of some students dropping out because they feel like they can't do it. How do you keep these students interested to learn Kinyarwanda even if there are all those challenges around?
Yeah, one of the I guess funny ways of doing it is at the events, like I was saying, sometimes we have community events from Umuganura to Intsinzi, just different events that bring Rwandan communities together. And our students quiz specifically the students who have dropped out. So once they actually quiz them, it's really beautiful because it's kind of challenging, and you're like, whoa, this child who's younger than me has progressed more than I have. So there's a bit of that happens, and it's playful and it's not to embarrass anyone, but it's kind of a playful way to show that there is progress if you persist. And then other ways, we're still struggling, we're still trying to figure it out. We're hopefully, if we can have more teachers who can volunteer, we can then streamline and say there's a class for people who are under 16 and there's a class for people who are over 16. But in order for that to happen, we need at least another 2 or 3 volunteer teachers who can take turns. Yeah.
So, since you started, you say that you've been working on this for 2 years. What are some of the achievements that you're happy about, despite the challenges being there? What are some of the achievements that you really are happy about?
One of the main one is children being able to pronounce their last names, because it was quite a struggle. I remember the first class that they all had was like, write your last name if it's a Kinyarwanda name, and sometimes you have a first name that's Kinyarwanda as well. So they will write it, but then they will pronounce it with an English accent or an Australian accent. Like for example, instead of saying Iriza, they will say Iriza. So there's a bit of a sad reality there. So a lot of the children and students are able to pronounce their last names properly, and they're able to tell you the meaning of their last names. So that's one of the biggest achievements. Another achievement is that they're able to sing the national anthem at all the events that we have, from Kwibuka events to Muganura and many other events that bring us together. They're able to sing the national anthem and understand it a little bit as well. It's a bit tricky. It's a long national anthem. And so that's one of the main achievements. And another one is to seeing the relationships that they have with each other. Of course, they already had a sense of friendship, but it's really beautiful because I remember when I grew up in Kigali from a really young age, and I remember growing up in a community and having a lot of friends and people to talk to, and it's really nice for those students to have that sense of friendship and for them to form their own relationships with each other. It's quite powerful, and we see it a lot in class, but also when we go to excursions and how the older students look after the younger students, even if they're not related. It's quite it's a nice thing to see.
Yeah. Let me come back to the collaboration with you and Maurice, the teacher. In your experience, how can young people and also older people collaborate to promote and preserve the Rwandan culture in the diaspora?
I think it's really crucial because Maurice is someone who is a knowledge holder. He used to teach in Rwanda. He used to teach at university, and he knows Kinyarwanda better than I do. He can write it better than I do. He can speak it better than I do. And I think a lot of Rwandans who live out abroad, but also even within Rwanda, when we look at people who are older than us, people who are our parents' age or our grandparents' age, there really are elders who hold a lot of history and a lot of knowledge because of their years. So it's quite powerful for you to have that resource in your community. And then as young people, sometimes maybe we have a bit more of a flexible schedule and flexible time because we don't have intense family commitments. So because of that time, it allows us, it's something that a lot of older people don't really have. So it's kind of like they have all the knowledge, we've got a bit of time, and for us to come together, it creates this really magical, powerful thing where, for example, for the Kinyarwanda classes, I'm able to support Maurice in doing all the administrative work that he he just doesn't have the time for. And he's also able to show up and teach as a teacher and do an incredible job. So I think that same formula can be applied to maybe Rwandans who love to do like traditional dancing, for example. If you've got elders in your community who can dance or who clap hands, and how do we connect with them and ensure that we're not disconnected as well, because that can happen quite often.
Yeah, now the program has been running for 2 years. What are the future plans that you have to keep expanding and promoting this program?
Yes, the main goal is to really have more volunteer teachers who are the parents of the students as well that we have. So the biggest goal, especially for 2025, is to see how we can possibly branch out and have 2 classes, one for, as I mentioned, people who are under 16 and another who are people who are over 16. So that's one of the main goals. Another main goal of ours is to work with like institutions in Rwanda who work and preserve language and ensure that we're using the most up-to-date material and resources, from exercise books to storytelling books to poetry books that children can engage with. And then another bigger goal is to ensure that we're continuing, specifically in Australia, we are continuing to engage with other cultural groups and other language groups, and going to visit museums and making sure that students are really understanding the social fabric of Australian life. And hopefully when they also come to Rwanda, they also have a similar engagement through their families, being connected to different institutions and visiting and going on trips together. And yeah, so those are the main 2025 and beyond goals.
I would really like to keep the conversation going, but time is not on our side. But I would like to ask you this particular question. How do you see learning Kinyarwanda contributing to the children's sense of like identity as part of the Rwandan community abroad?
It's really critical. I think language is one of the main things that builds your character and builds your heritage. And once you really lose that, you lose a different way of looking at life. Like I think if you a Kinyarwanda speaker who thinks a little bit differently from just an English speaker, because just our histories are different, the way we pronounce things are different, the way we connect and write words are different and sentences are different. So
Definitely.
it really, it's crucial because it adds a different aspect to your character. And as a young person, it really builds your strength and your joy and pride in your country and in your culture. And I think it's one of the most critical things, language, and for young people, and also for anyone in general. Language is like how we're communicating right now, even though we're using English, but without this language, we wouldn't be able to communicate.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are there any other plans that you plan on incorporating in this program, or you will just keep with the Kinyarwanda teaching program?
I think we found it quite important that we try to work at a pace that is manageable and not to move too quickly, because then we'll get tired and burnt out really quickly. So we're hoping that it's been 2 years of consistency, and now we're gonna branch out and try to do the 2 different classes and see how that works out, and then we'll come back with any feedback from parents and fix things as we go. But that's really the main goal for this year, is to just keep at the pace that we're going at. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda Iriza, for the insightful conversation. It's so good to learn about how the Rwandan community is thriving and also promoting their culture where they are in different countries around the globe. Thank you for being part of this discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for tuning in to this episode of Roots and Wings Iwachu. Today's conversation with Linda Iriza has highlighted the role of language, which plays in connecting communities and preserving culture heritage. Join us next time as we continue to bring stories of Rwandan community abroad, making a difference around the world. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, and stay engaged, and keep celebrating the essence of the Rwandan culture. Thank you for being with us.